We ask the Lord's presence today, that He blesses all the families here, that He gives us good information and clarity, that we may live to Your glory and honor, Father. And we thank You for the opportunity to communicate with each other, and thank You for this wonderful fellowship. We ask in Christ's name, amen. Okay, last week I kind of gave an overview of the neurodevelopmental profile. I'm thankful to Chalcedon for making this venue available in the 412 Center, and I hope you all will take advantage of it because we have a lot of different speakers. I'm the first experimental one. And also resources that you can use and teach, and you can bring your children in and get free books. And free books. Thank you, Jesus. And what I do as a neurodevelopmentalist, excuse me, sorry, Dave. I started out life as a chemical engineer, and I had a kid back in 1984. And the brain has always fascinated me. Chemical engineers are systems engineers. And providentially, I ran across Glenn Doman's work out of the Goodwill bookstore. And so I started studying the neurodevelopmental work. And since 1984, based on that, my son learned to read. He was a fully automatized reader by the age of 2. He was reading at college level by the age of 7. And based on that, I can see that we are nowhere near reaching the potential of how we're created to be. Okay, you've got to forget the school system. You've got to forget the levels. You've got to forget. Are you trying to get me coffee? Water? Oh, thank you, darling. And so it's a passion of mine to give you new eyes to look at the way your children function, develop, and how we're actually created, instead of looking at the neuro psychologist profile of labeling, limiting, and so forth. So my passion and my vision is not only to help people overcome learning problems and put you on a path for optimal development for all of your children so we can reach historical levels of function. Our forefathers used to function at a much higher level than we do today. And it's mainly because of the school systems. But y'all homeschool, right? And I see it possible, you know. I work with lots of children with Down syndrome. They're usually reading by 2 and 3 years old, which just is so cool because, you know, they're supposed to be retarded and all this stuff. So they start school far ahead of their peers, usually, and some of them stay ahead of their peers. So anyway, so intelligence is not in the brain. It's spiritual. It's the image of God in each individual. The intelligence is there in each and every child. And I've seen it, you know, graphically manifested with some of my brain-injured children. Even ones that are born without a brain, they actually start doing things if you stimulate them properly. So we're created with 2 interesting facts, and these are from the notes last week. Hierarchical development, the brain grows in an organized way, and you need to go through all those developmental steps, and that's what this is, and that's what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about processing today. And neuroplasticity, you actually change your brain by how you use it. You change your brain by how you use it. The brain is constantly being rewired. If you use your brain to be stupid, you're going to be stupid. If you use your brain to be smart, you're going to be smart, okay? If you use your brain in a specific way, you can help enhance function. And if there's a dysfunction, you can rewire the central nervous system. The scientific community knows this. The therapeutic community is just catching up. How many of you have a child that's labeled dyslexic? Dyslexic. Dyslexia means I can't read as well as your IQ indicates you should be able to. You pay $1,500 to get that test to tell you that, right? Well, duh. You already know you can't read as well. Why is my child not reading? Well, let's test him. Your child isn't reading because he's dyslexic. What does dyslexia mean? It means he can't read as well as his IQ indicates he should be able to. You know, how do you get rid of it? They give you compensatory things, but they don't tell you how to get rid of it. I started in this work in 1984. I've seen over 2,000 families and worked with overcoming dyslexia, name the label, you know, ADD, ODD. I do have some odd kids. The learning disabilities, dysgraphia, they always come up with new ones. Sensory integration disorder, autism, brain injury, Down syndrome, and other genetic disorders I've worked with. So if we had the wisdom to go in and stimulate the system properly, we can actually rewire it and help the kids overcome problems. And adults, you know, adults that have a brain injury can rewire the system to help regain function and improve function. But also knowing this information, knowing the developmental profiles, tells us how we should treat our babies. We need to treat our babies so they can go through these developmental steps in an organized fashion and not miss them, because when you do, then you wind up with learning disabilities, you wind up with sensory issues, and so forth. So, so that's what I do. I do an evaluation based on, pretty much this is my map. I look at the development from level 1, which is birth level, to level 7, which is neurological organization. This corresponds to brainstem level, pons level of the brain, midbrain level, what the baby should be doing, and then moving up into the cortex. So the stimulation of the baby helps develop sensory input that helps organize the brain, crosses over in the motor centers of the brain, in the pons and the midbrain, and then lateralizes the brain. You know, you have a left cortex and a right cortex, and helps organize the system in a very systematic way. If you miss some of those steps, like you don't let your baby crawl on his tummy, which a lot of people do because we put kids in buckets and jump ups, and all these things instead of letting them get on the floor and crawl, or we encourage them to walk too early. Then you can, it's like having the bottom of the funnel with a hole in it. You know, the brain doesn't develop in an organized way, and you can wind up with dysfunctions there. Other things can interfere with that development, and we won't talk about vaccines. All right, so that's a long. So last week you have the developmental profile. And this is new to half of you, right? Okay, we'll talk about that. So I didn't go through the details of the steps. In the handout from last week, the last page was the obstacle course. And if you have a child that is uncoordinated, has balance problems, and so forth, put them through the obstacle course. Coordination is usually one of the first things that comes in. Have them crawl in their tummy, have them creep on their hands and knees, have them cross skip. And you know, because kids are inside and doing this all day, they don't go out and do those things we used to do as kids. They don't play hopscotch. They don't do jump rope. They don't, do monkey bars like we used to do when we were little. Did you do monkey bars? Mm-hmm. Let me see. Did you? Okay. Huh?
I'm 47 years old. So.
Child.
Yeah.
She's 47 and has 10 children. Okay. I'm 67. Oh. So, and you know, we play the hand games, the slap games, and so forth. That actually helps the brain. All those things help develop the brain. And we don't do those things anymore. Kids can't do it. When I worked with a church school, and we had a church school, we had 47 children 6 years and under, and we had a big gymnasium. These are neurotypical kids, right? We had these wonderful wrestling mats. Wrestling mats are very expensive, but on the floor of the gymnasium. And threw the kids on the floor and told them to crawl. Most of them couldn't do it. They could not do it. They couldn't pedal a bike, you know, like a big wheel. They couldn't skip. Couldn't jump rope. So 20 minutes, 3 times a week, I trained the teachers. They came in and did those things because of peer pressure with all those kids. Within a month, they were flying. And the feedback was the best learning year, the best, I don't know what you did, but his coordination improved. You know, just doing those simple things on the obstacle course so that you have for your children. So our children should be able to do all those things. So after, you know, when I look at how the brain is organized, you know, and if we look at this is the inputs to the brain, which is visual, auditory, and tactility. How you see, how your ear hear, and how your body feels. And from birth level all the way up, you look at and these are the major motor outputs, which is fine motor, manual function, speech and language, and gross motor mobility. So I won't be distracted by the baby. You know, if your child's going through all those things, then the next thing I develop is processing. I want to see how well the child is processing, or the adult, auditory and visually. And this isn't long-term memory. This is short-term working memory, all right? And if you do one thing with your children, improving short-term working auditory memory will improve their functional intelligence, period. If you have a child that's called intellectually disabled, they don't call them mentally retarded anymore, do they? I'm so passé, I never get out. You know, their short-term working memory is low. And I'm going to give you a test. Are you ready? She's shaking her head no. Let me know when you're ready. Okay. Short-term working memory is how many pieces you can hold in short-term auditory memory and output. All right? All right. If it's low, what symptoms do you see? Can't follow directions. Socially immature. Few friends. You know, just can't read with phonics. Knows all the rules. Ka, ta, I have no clue what that means, right? Because you have to be at auditory processing of 6 in order to be successful with phonics. So, is he reading already? Well, time to get him started. There you go. I'm not going to be distracted by the baby. All right, so if I say B7 to pi, got that? 3LD theta 9. Got that? It's the redhead. 4 beta 2 9 gamma X. Poor thing. We'll work on you later. That's 6. Did everybody get that? Except the redhead? Lambda R P 9 delta 2 3. Did you get that? Okay. That's 7. All right. When I started in this work in 1984, the average adult could do 7. And that's why telephone numbers were 7 numbers, because the average adult could remember, take in and output 7 pieces. Today it's 5.5. All right. And we've tested people and found out it's dropped. We've dropped a developmental 1.5 years since 1984 in 30 years. Because what are we today? We're a visual society. We're here. We don't listen to good language. We don't even hear good language. We don't even hear good grammar, you know. Give your kids good grammar. I'm kind of a grammar Nazi. But that's my mother's fault. She corrected me all the time. If you want your child in the intellectually superior level of our society, auditory processing, short-term memory should be 8 to 12 pieces. Now, if you've read any of the old sermons from the 1700s, the old political speeches, George Washington's farewell address, the second sentence went on for a page and a half. Can you imagine people today processing from a politician a sentence that goes on for a page and a half, much less holding those pieces together? So it's not the potential, it's how we're using the system that has actually caused us to be an intellectually immature society today compared to what we used to be. But you can give that gift to your children. Your goal should be 8 to 12 auditory sequences. And when my son was little, he was 12, 14, I had an only child, so I had to borrow kids, right? And so they worked on the auditory pieces with each other, and they got up to 10s, 12s, 15s, 18s, okay? I was going for, high 1600 on the SATs, right? So we could get, into school free. So working with each other, you know how males are competitive. You know that, right? Just watch roosters. And so, just practicing those sequences helps it. And you have a handout on different things you can do. You can practice. How can you help improve auditory processing? You can practice these sequences. And Dr. Sue Buckley out of England that works with the Down syndrome group there in England. What's the number one thing with Down syndrome? Speech and low processing, all right? They're called intellectually disabled. She showed in this published work, even though we've done this since the 1960s, worked on auditory processing and showed it can be improved. She actually did the studies and had them published and showed that practicing the sequences helps improve the auditory processing. So have any of your children been labeled with central auditory processing disorder? Okay. This is what you do to improve that. All right. Now, what can get in the way of that? If we look at the auditory input to the brain, the birth level is, with a new baby, they startle at each sound, and then they develop the ability to distinguish tones. All right. They react to threatening sounds. They'll cry, or they can, react positively to cooey sounds at that time. A meaningful change in tonality, and then we start to get into words, and then whatever. In the auditory system, you have the ability to hear. And if you have ear infections, you have ear fluid, which a lot of our kids have, all right, because we don't have that good a diet and we get all this inflammation. The child isn't hearing tones the same each day, all right? If you have water in your ear, it doesn't sound the same as when you're listening with your ears clear. And that's what it's like when our kids get ear fluid. And our kids have high pain tolerance. You can't tell when they have fluid in their ears. And the doctor cannot look at the eardrum and tell. He's got to do a tympanogram. You know what a tympanogram is? It's where they puff a little bit of air against the eardrum and they give you a little graph output. When they puff the air against the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, the eardrum should move. If it stays flat, you have a flat output. That means there's fluid behind it, and the eardrum can't move appropriately. So don't let the doctor just look at the eardrum and say, oh, it's fine. They actually need to do a tympanogram to make sure that the child's hearing appropriately. So hearing is really important in the development of all children, and making sure the ears are clear, and staying away from food allergies. The number one food allergen I've found is store milk, all right? Milk you buy at the grocery store. They actually deliver raw milk here every Wednesday, which is a much better alternative. But staying away from store milk, my son had strep and all this stuff all these years until I finally got clued in to get rid of the store milk. Store milk is nasty stuff. Food allergies, the stuff in processed foods, all that things, I'm kind of a food Nazi. And don't eat processed foods, it's bad stuff. And now with recent lawsuits, they're finding that they all have Roundup in them, which is toxic to your system. You're aware of that suit that the guy won, showing all that Roundup their neighbors have been spraying all over your yard all these years is actually bad for you. Can you imagine? And when they're harvesting grains, they spray Roundup on it to get the leaves off, and it makes it easier to harvest. So even some of your organic grains have Roundup in them. Isn't that lovely? So know your farmer, do the best you can, pray a lot, and so looking at a whole foods, nutrient-dense diet, I'm a big Weston Price fan, westonaprice.org, Nourishing Traditions, are you familiar with those? I love you guys. It's fun preaching to the choir. Nourishing Traditions, so, move your family to as much of a whole food, nutrient-dense diet as you can. And, you're swimming upstream in this society. You go into I was at a restaurant one time. My son never had candy, never. We were checking out of the restaurant, and the guy in front of us turned around and handed him a lollipop. And I said, do you give drugs to kids too? But anyway, I'm real subtle like that. So anyway, so you have to hear well. So make sure your kids' ears are clear of fluid when they're little. There's something you can get at the drugstore called an ear check monitor, and it is a go, no-go tympanogram. In other words, you can check it at home. And it puffs a little bit of air against the eardrum, and it gives you a light on or off to tell you if there's fluid in there. If there's fluid in there, you should probably go get a tympanogram from an ENT or audiologist or whatever. There's another item called the eardoc, eardoc.info, which is it's a vibrating thing you put behind the ear, and it helps clear the eustachian tube and help the ear drain. They put tubes in the ears and it drains to the outside. What's the normal way for ears to drain? Into the eustachian tubes, right? So the ear doc actually helps do that. Also cranial work, cranial osteopathy, or I recommend Dr. Jerry Hockman, who teaches at Life Chiropractic in Marietta. And he a good cranial person can actually adjust and help the eustachian tubes drain and make sure everything's in place for a proper function like that. It's J. Hockman, Hochman, at life.edu. You have to email him, and he only sees clients a couple days a week. But he loves my kids, so he loves seeing the kids, and he's really good with them. Caleb's been to him. He's saved our cookies a lot of time. He does sacral occipital technique, which is a different type of chiropractic than just snapping, popping. It's SOT. There's other practitioners, sorsi.com, if you live in another state or whatever. But Dr. Hockman does his own thing too, his own techniques he's developed. So I don't know what he does. He does magic, okay? He does magic. I recommend all your children be checked once. And the thing I like about Dr. Hockman is you go in once, twice maybe. He'll tell you if you need to come back, and you're done. You don't have to come twice a week for the rest of your life. All right? He just fixes it. Is that cool or what? So he also has a discount for families. If you bring in your whole family. He doesn't know how many kids you have, so don't tell him ahead of time. I had one mom with 9 kids. He said, I'll do your whole family for $150. She said the whole family? She only took 3. So anyway, he's a good guy. I'm fun to deal with, and he's very straightforward and honest. So he's fixed me. Fixed my hip, fixed my knee, fixed my back. I was in agony last week. He came in on Friday to see me. Bless him. Okay, so keep the ears clear of fluid. The other thing you need to do is to do language, lots of high quality language. We used to read to our children. We used to read to each other as families. We heard excellent language, all right? We don't do that today. We hear crummy language on TV. So I recommend lots of, I'm so old, I'm going to say books on tape, but you can download free books, MP3 files from bookshouldbefree.com, lightupyourbrain.com. You can download them to an MP3 player and play those into what should be the dominant ear. If your child is right-handed, the right ear should be dominant, and it'll help develop the language center on the left side of the brain. If your child is left-handed, it should go into the left ear and develop the language center over here. If your child has a stutter, the hemispheres of the brain are chattering back and forth, trying to decide which hemisphere should be dominant. So that's something we need to work on specifically.
With a child younger that doesn't have hand dominance yet.
Yeah, if you look at the genetic, then you do both ears.
Okay.
Then you do both ears.
If
Yes?
their dominance is mixed, do you do both ears too?
I can't hear you.
If their dominance is mixed, do you do both ears too?
If your dominance is mixed, you need to fix that. That's a long talk, is deciding which should be dominant. First of all, you look at the genetics. You make sure they can do all those things on the developmental profile, on the crawling, creeping, and all that. And if all those things are in place, the dominant should naturally emerge. And if you're you can look at the hair swirls. Don't tell Jerry Hockman this, though, because he doesn't believe me. Look at the back of the head. And this is what I do in church. I learn, look at the back. If the hair swirls to the right, they're clockwise, they're right-handed. To the left, they're left-handed. If you have a dual opposing swirls, they're dyslexic, okay? You need to go see Jerry Hockman. If they have curly hair, it's almost impossible to tell. Or if they have long hair, it's hard to tell. It's interesting how God reveals these things to you, because I had one of my moms has 5 boys, and her youngest 2 were very autistic, and they're pretty recovered. But Seth, number 4, he kept regressing, And so she came from California to see Dr. Bergeron. Do you know Dr. Bergeron? You know everybody. She knows everybody.
I actually recently met him for myself, to have myself treated.
He's precious, precious friend for many, many years.
He found Lyme and Bartonella.
Huh?
He found Lyme and Bartonella.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. He told me I had a little Lyme. Mm-hmm. I said, is that like being a little pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay, so Seth had 3 hair swirls. This is before I knew any of this stuff. One going left. I knew that if you're right-handed and left-handed. He had 3, double opposing plus 1 up here, right? So he went to Dr. Bergeron. She took him to Dr. Bergeron to check out to see, what are we missing here? Mm-hmm. So he had somebody in his office that did cranial adjustments and found one of the plates of his skull was jammed. Mm-hmm. Adjusted that, and all 3 hair swirls went from 3 to 1 in front of us. We were looking like, and Seth was clear, didn't regress. So if something is out of whack, it interferes with how the cerebral spinal fluid flows over the brain, affects attention, function, and so forth. So do cranial work, all right? So then I had the information, okay, if you have weird hair swirls, something's going on with your brain, right? Well, who can adjust those? It's been a path I've been trying to follow for a couple decades now. Because Seth is that tall and he's this tall now. But also, like with adopted children, one of my kids in North Carolina I saw, we were wondering which hand should be dominant, because he's adopted. We don't know his background, his biological background. You are genetically disposed to be either right-handed or left-handed. You don't want to find your genetics. You want to find the right way to go according to your genetics. So this kid had double opposing hair swirls. Dad cut his hair on Sunday, double opposing hair swirls. Took him for a cranial adjustment Monday. Brought him to me Tuesday, and he had one hair swirl. So that one adjustment got the hair swirls to go, and then we knew which way to go with his hand. That's one way, all right? There's a lot of other ways that we do that. How did I get on that? All right, we're talking about dominance. Auditory processing, that's what we're talking about, right? So read to your children. Read to your children high-quality information. Do you know the 1,000 Good Books list? If you Google 1,000 good books, you come up with 1,000 good books by grade level. All right, so read a little bit above your children's level and beyond their interests. So you're continually expanding them into more language, and read classics, read good quality. Don't dumb things down for your kids, all right, because they pick it up. They're designed to pick it up. I've got some old school books, and you wouldn't believe the level of language of the 3rd and 4th grade, you know, from the 1920s and 30s, and, you know, we just, memory work, memorizing things. And I'm a big fan of memory work. That helps auditory processing. There's, what's the name of that website? Play MP3 Online, is that the name of it? I forget. If you're on Facebook, I have a neurodevelopmental page where I post all those resources. You can friend me, and I can put you on there. You can actually, like if you want to memorize scripture, you know, little children, even things I memorized when I was 8, I can remember now. Like there's a Japanese song I can repeat. I have no idea what it means, but I still remember totally. Our little children are designed to soak up information and memorize it. So, gosh, I wish I'd done this when my son was little, that they can memorize so much scripture and speeches, and people used to do that. So I recommend, like if you want to memorize a piece of scripture, put 30 seconds to 1 minute on the MP3 file, play it for 5 minutes into the dominant ear, and they'll memorize it more quickly that way. I think it's playmp3online.com. You can email me. I didn't put any cards out. I've got some cards here somewhere. So reading narration. Have you used narration? Are you familiar with narration? Narration is where you're reading to your children, and they have to tell you back what you read. And if they don't, they go to their room with no ice cream, right? Narration is a wonderful tool for helping children improve auditory processing. And I have a little story. I had a family with 9 children, and Dad worked from home. He worked for a newspaper, but he worked from home. And the oldest was 12, and he had a double hair swirl. He had such a double hair swirl that he had a ridge of hair like a dinosaur down the middle. But anyway, this whole family walked in talking, and they walked out talking 3 hours later, all right? They just talked. And so, but the 12-year-old couldn't read at all right? So I tested him, and I tested all the normal stuff, and his dominance was all off, and his eyes didn't work properly. And so I tested his auditory processing, and everybody was 7 to 8, the whole family. And I went, because I usually expect 3 to 4 when they can't read and all that. So I'm looking at them, and I said, what's the deal with you guys? How come your auditory processing is so high? Every night, Dad read to the kids for 2 hours. And he didn't read baby books. From the babies up to the 12-year-old, he read things like Moby Dick. And they all had to sit there and listen. And they absorbed at their own level what they could. So that was just a graphic demonstration to me that auditory input developed. Even though the little babies couldn't understand it later on, they developed to the point where it did improve their auditory processing. So all those things we historically used to do, like talk to each other instead of read to each other, listen to long sermons and speeches. We have hour-long sermons here. And, you know, those good things we used to do help develop superior auditory processing compared to what we have today. So that is a wonderful gift you can give your children. You can also practice the auditory sequences with them. And it's shown that this improves auditory processing. If I say B, 7, 2, and the child can get 3 and they can't get 4, I might do a bridging. I'll say B, 7, 2, pi. I'd use the same sequence and give them an extra one. So I say it about 2 seconds apart, 2 to 2 seconds apart, in a monotone, because if you get sing-songing, it becomes a song and it's not processed as language, it's processed as a song. And that's a different part of the brain, all right? So and just have them practice it and have rewards for improving and all that. But this is something, these are boring, all right? Boring. And so you have to be intense, positive, and patient, all right? Because when they get from 5 to 6, which might take a year, each increase in digit is a developmental year. A 1-year-old can do 1 piece, a 2-year-old can do 2 pieces, a 3-year-old 3 pieces, a 4-year-old 4 pieces, and so forth. So if you have a 9-year-old and they process at a level of 2, they're going to act like a 2-year-old. All right? Don't be surprised. When you have a 2-year-old, what do you have? No. Yes. No. That's because they're an on-off switch. They only have a processing of 2. They're either on or off. That's why a 2-year-old acts like a 2-year-old. If you get their processing to 3, they have an option. They have a middle option. And life becomes easier. Then they'll say, yes, no, why? Right? Now that's a 4-year-old, isn't it? Yes, no, why? So practice them and be intense and be with no distractions and be very positive when you do this, because I do this with hundreds of families and gradually it improves. You can throw them on the floor. Can I watch them crawling? You're fine. You don't have to leave. Hey, I get to see him awake. There you go. Cranky baby. Oh, he doesn't feel good, does he? Yeah. Just a minute, I'll show you some rhythmic movement with him. Yes, ma'am. I can't hear you. Songs is a different part of the brain. All right, let me do a little demonstration. What letter comes before Q? What number comes before 10? Which did you have faster access to mentally? Why? Because what?
They're sequential?
The alphabet is sequential. It's because you learn the alphabet as a song, so you had to sing it as a whole piece, all right? And then find the little part whereas with the numbers, you identify them sequentially as language. That's why classical conversations with all their songy stuff, it is a problem. All right, it's a different part of the brain that you're using.
You have to sing the whole song to get to that piece of information.
Yep.
I used to hear.
You also
Isn't that cool? That's the most graphic demonstration. Everybody wants to argue with me, but he can memorize so well if he does a song. Yeah, but it's a different part of the brain. It's not affecting it the same way. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question about how good it is for the kids to listen.
How good is what?
How good it is for them to listen well.
To listen?
I have
Listen
like
well.
to have a
How
good
good it is
auditory.
to listen well.
You what?
To have good auditory skills. But in my case, my kid listens. Like he's on the other extreme. He listens to things that I can't listen.
Is he hypersensitive hearing?
Probably.
Okay. Hypersensitive hearing also shuts down hearing. If hearing is painful, and autistic kids have this, sounds are actually painful to them. And it also keeps them awake. It can cause nightmares. It can cause them hearing things, that aren't there. So I usually recommend cod liver oil and magnesium for that. And it usually gets rid of the problem. Yeah. Dr. Mary Megson did a lot of work with autism and cod liver oil, and she found that if she fed cod liver oil, the retinol, to the autistic kids, some of them started talking. Some kids don't talk because sounds are so painful, they're auditorily shut down.
Yeah, for him it's very painful, and it gets very distracted. Like
Right.
I'm reading, he's listening to me, but he's listening to other stuff too, and he pays attention to his surroundings, so
Right.
he gets distracted.
Yeah.
So easily.
Yeah, if you're auditorily distractible, I would start with the magnesium and cod liver oil and see if that turns it down.
It's the vitamin A in the cod liver oil.
Huh?
Sorry. It's the vitamin A in the cod liver oil.
It's the retinol, yeah.
Yeah, because I've also heard of high-dose vitamin A therapy that will bring out speech. If you give, like, the Claire Labs makes the vitamin A drops, and if you give...
Well, the high-dose vitamin A therapy is if you have a measles infection in the gut, and it actually has helped cure that. Vitamin A is a cure for measles. So we do the high dose, 400,000 units a day for 2 days.
Yeah.
I thought vaccinations were the cure for me.
You what? You what?
She said vaccinations were the cure for measles.
What's the dose of
Magnesium.
Oh, it depends. If your child has constipation, do your child have constipation? You would use magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide or something like that. If you don't have constipation, magnesium glycinate, magnesium malate, magnesium taurate, one of the other forms of magnesium. That's why I said I have a group of about 3,300 people on Facebook where we talk about all these health issues all the time, and people feedback. We have a lot of health practitioners. Dr. Bergeron's on there too. Dr. Marianne Block out of Texas, and so forth.
What's the Facebook page?
Ness group. Isn't that a catchy title? No, I just did it a number of years ago. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
People just followed me because I was posting research articles, and now it's grown into this huge group. So I just kind of stepped back and I have moms of many, moms with 15 kids, mom with, and they're helping each other and sharing their experiences. So it's really wonderful. Plus some really good practitioners. And then some crazies. But the real crazies I kick off, which I have power. Or if you're selling a multi-level marketing product, out the door. So anyway, what were we talking about? Auditory processing. Sound sensitivity.
Is the group you're talking about on Facebook the Ness group?
Yeah.
There's a Ness and then the Ness group.
Yeah, send me a friend request and I can. All right. Yeah, we've fenced the group pretty well. We try to keep all the crazies and the mean people out. So, but we do have a very diverse group. We have, I have a bunch of people from Egypt, Oman, China, Australia, Poland, Africa. Have people from all over. Some Buddhists are on there, so we try to be respectful to people and just be kind witnesses, right? The magnesium depends on the size you want to titrate up. Like I take about 400 to 600 milligrams a day, and I'm about 150 pounds. So with a child 100 pounds, I would do 200 or 300 milligrams a day, something like that. But you can do an RBC magnesium test. The serum magnesium test is worthless. The red blood cell magnesium test tells you your magnesium status. So it's really good to get those tests done if you can. The doctors look at you like you're crazy, and they only want to run the serum magnesium test. This is all the stuff we talk about on the group page. So yeah, almost everybody's deficient in magnesium. That's why the South is the heart attack capital of the country, not because we eat chicken fried steak, but because our soil is very low in magnesium down here. Magnesium is really important. It's called nature's tranquilizer. It's involved with 400 different enzymatic reactions in the body and so forth. So my quick fix is magnesium and cod liver oil. I use Rosita's or the greenpasture.org cod liver oil, which is fermented with a butter oil, which contains vitamin K2. I could go on and on about the nutritional stuff because you need those. You shouldn't have osteoporosis and all these things if you get everything properly. Sound sensitivity will interfere with auditory processing and also makes you very auditorily distractible and make it hard to pay attention, certainly. Yeah, I commonly see that. And when I have a child that's ADD, what distracts them? Visual, auditory, or tactile. It could be reflexes, could be how their body's functioning. It could be sound, it could be visual tracking and convergence and all that. All right, so practicing auditory sequences, reading to your children, doing narration, memory work, listening to lots of language. Another thing I do with children is we call it our Walmart sound therapy, is I do Mozart with headphones. And I use a simple Mozart, and I use it with headphones, which directly impacts the tympanic membrane, which tends to tone down sound sensitivity and helps them develop those auditory pathways to the brain. I am also trained in other sound therapy modalities. Mozart is cheap and dirty and easy. You don't have to do Mozart, you could do other Baroque. But I like the Baroque music because it's high frequencies, it's mathematically complex, and it's very organizing and stimulating to the brain. Low frequency sounds, ba-bum, 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 is very disorganizing to the brain and makes you stupid, okay? So when you're in the traffic and the car next to you is going, you know they're getting dumber as they listen. So pray for them, all right? Poor little boo-boo.
Can I add something about the ear infections?
Yes, ma'am?
My oldest daughter, when she was little, we went to the ENT constantly because she had constant ear infections. He was a lousy doctor. I didn't know at the time, but he was the only one that took our insurance.
We've all been there and done that. Go ahead.
But because he was such a lousy doctor, she had hearing loss.
Right.
Because of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I got better insurance, I changed doctors, and went to the doctor and said, I want tubes, because the doctor, now, he never put tubes, did her adenoids or tonsils, in 7 years of constant ear infections, 3-4 times a year. I went to a new doctor, said, I want tubes put in her ears, adenoids and tonsils taken. He said that the fluid behind her ears was so stagnant that it was thick.
Right.
They had to suction it
Right.
out. It was so bad. So if you're having recurrent ear infections and your doctor
And do a tympanogram.
is not doing what
Right.
he should, change doctors.
Right.
Even if you have to pay out of pocket, it may save your child's hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a recommendation for a good ENT in the area?
Dr. Thompson, he's the head of ENT at CHOA.
Dr.
Keith.
Thompson.
Or Dr.
Yeah, ask her.
Dr. Bosco.
She's chewed all of them up and spit them out, so she'll tell you.
I actually have. I've seen different ENTs.
Where is Dr. Thompson?
At CHOA. At Scottish Rite.
Sorry, I'm just not familiar.
Oh, sorry. It's
Is that in the West?
yeah.
Hey, boo boo.
It's Children's Hospital
Hi,
at
boo
the
boo.
Scottish Rite location.
Aw.
Yeah.
Hi, boo boo.
Just I think pediatrics only. I would.
It's okay.
There is one doctor in particular that I would not recommend. Her name is Dr. Melissa Statham. Do not go to her. She wanted to slice and dice Jackson's epiglottis. And that's how I saw 4 ENTs, because she wanted to do surgery and like made this whole big thing and like called his pediatrician and called his GI and his pulmonologist and got everyone on alert, like his airway is blocked, and it was like this whole huge thing, and tried to force us into surgery. And I got a second opinion from Dr. Baktha and then a third opinion from Dr. Thompson, who actually finally for the 3rd time scoped him and put it on the TV screen so that I could see what his epiglottis and esophagus looked like, and they were perfect. So she would have cut him, and he probably would have had a trach and all kinds of stuff. So I do not recommend her.
Well, good for you.
She's amazing.
We're very good.
She's amazing.
Warrior mom.
She really is. I'm so glad to meet y'all, because you can just help each other so much. Help each other so much. Okay, so hearing properly is important. Doing your Walmart or your Bach or your Mozart into the ears is important. I also do some sound therapy. If I can get some of my CDs back from families. Okay, so any more questions about auditory processing?
I actually do have a question. What about things like specific frequencies of sound that are just sound frequencies, like the buzzing sort of like that are like, you know what I'm talking about? It's not music, but it's
For
like,
what?
for meditation or for different things. Like
I
it's a
use
20 hertz
what's the name of that stuff?
frequency.
No,
Listening therapies, but with sound tones.
not TLP. TLP is a bad system. Michael Turrell, the music, the healing music. We've seen some good things with that.
I'm not sure if that's the one, but similar things where they play, like, you know, they'll layer music with the frequencies.
Oh,
Like
no.
10 hertz or
Do
20
not
hertz
do
or
Do
things
not
like
do
that.
binaural beats.
Yes.
Binaural beats cause weird stuff. It could actually bring on seizures. We've actually seen kids regress to bedwetting, night walking, drops in auditory processing. Binaural beats actually looks like a seizure on an EEG because it puts one frequency in one ear, one frequency in the other ear, and it has a spike.
Okay.
All right? Do not do binaural beats or Monroe Institute's HemiSync.
Okay.
They were selling it for therapy, and we were seeing weird stuff until we did some research and figured out what was going on. So do not do that. Okay, for little children, what are you going to do for auditory processing? For little children, you'll just start with directions. Say, touch your nose, touch your hair, touch your ear and your mouth. They could do 2 steps, okay? Touch your tummy and your toes. Okay, you can do those types of things. And I gave you a handout on different things. Wave, clap. You know, you can do those types of things. So a 1-year-old should do 1 step. A 2-year-old should do 2 steps. And you can just practice those things throughout the day. You can do play the I went to the store game. I went to the store and bought an elephant, a banana, and a tree. Okay, and have them repeat that. All right. I also use the little memory cards, little picture cards, and put them down the table, cover them up, and I said, okay, hand me apple, hat, banana. And they'll pick up those cards in that order. So there's different ways you can do auditory processing. It's just that they immediately in and then output that information. So you have some papers, handouts on that type of thing to practice those with your children. Okay? Any more questions on auditory processing? I can't tell you how important this is. Cannot emphasize it enough. We had a woman, we worked with a ranch out in Arizona for mentally disabled adults. And one woman was 43, I think, and her processing was 1. And a gal there was training with us to do, and she started doing program with these ranchers, they were called. And the woman went from 1 to 3 in a year's time processing. And they had these different jobs for the ranchers, and one of them was making these stepping stones. And the woman used to take a whole year just to make 1 stepping stone. When she got to processing at 3, she started creating her own, and she had her own show. All right? She actually started to have a life at the age of 43 because her processing got so that she could actually interact with her society. If your processing is low, if you have kids that don't get jokes, all right, they don't understand or they cannot process the language enough to understand what's going on. If you're 5 or below, you're at that point. I have a really cute example of that. I was working with a young man who was adopted, very hyper. And I used to put on Rocky and Bullwinkle while I was talking to the parents, and the kids would watch the cartoons because Rocky and Bullwinkle is truth and knowledge, right? And so Eric used to just watch the slapstick, and he would laugh at the slapstick, but he wouldn't get the language jokes. Okay, after a year, his processing went from 5 to 8, and all of a sudden he was laughing. If you're familiar with Rocky and Bullwinkle, they do a lot of play on words. He was actually laughing at those, and it just showed that his ability to process language improved to the point where he could actually function, language-wise, so much better. So, yes?
Is that the same thing? Our 16-year-old he doesn't know yet how to discern, and I don't know if it's discernment or processing, if someone is actually a friend or not.
Actually what?
A friend or not. He doesn't know social cues. He doesn't know if...
What is his processing level? You're going to have to test him.
Okay.
And see what his processing level is.
Okay.
It could be several things.
He's immature and he doesn't know how to follow directions around the house. What do you tell me?
So when you're talking to your kids and their processing is 3, don't talk to them in long sentences. Talk them to 3 to 4 to 5 word sentences, okay? And give them a chance to obey. All right? They can't obey if you're sitting there blah, 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 blah. What was that Peanuts cartoon?
Yeah.
Rah, 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 rah. Rah, 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 rah. Yes, ma'am?
So when you're talking about things like reading
Yes?
and, just having this language.
That's next week.
Okay. Reading aloud to the kids.
Yes?
Earlier. But they maybe aren't processing all these things that you're talking about. So where's the balance in that? Have you...
Just tell them to sit there and listen. It'll improve actually doing that. it'll improve.
Whether they get it or not.
One of the who does the narration? What's it called?
I use it in my curriculum. It's a short technique, but
You know what it
Wise, Jesse Wise and Susan.
No, the founder of it. What's her name? Huh?
Charlotte Mason.
No. I'll think of it in a minute. I'm old. These pathways are getting rusty. Isn't he the cutest thing? But yeah, like I told the father of the babies to the 12-year-old, he read the Moby Dick to them. So, Charlotte Mason, that's right. You're right. Charlotte Mason. And the children will respond according to what they picked up. So, but when you're trying to get them to obey or follow rules, speak to them in sentences appropriate to their level of processing.
A question about hearing. What are different ways that you can evaluate hearing? And at what point is the evaluation of hearing worth sedation? Like for him specifically, when he was an infant, he failed his initial hearing screening on one side and passed on the other side.
With an ABR, right?
That was just a screening. So then we did a non-sedated ABR, and the results were the opposite. The side that he had failed on, he passed completely, and the side that he had passed on,
Stinker.
he referred on one of the three tones. So they wanted to retest a year later, but at that time they wanted to sedate him to do the ABR. And I didn't think it was worth
Keep looking around. Keep looking around
him.
somebody doing unsedated ABR.
Okay.
Yeah. But what are you going to do if it doesn't pass?
Well, and that was
You're going to do the sound stimulation with him.
So just do it anyway.
And you're going to make sure, right,
Right.
right.
Hi, I know.
I mean, I would have to have a long talk with you how he responds to sounds and all this type of stuff. So, yeah. Oh, he's crying. He's worried. These two are the cutest ever. All right. And this is the busiest mom ever. Hey, boo-boo. Yes. I know. I'm trying here. Okay. I'm going to talk briefly about visual processing, which to me isn't as important as auditory processing. Visual processing is usually higher in our society. And again, this is visual short-term memory. Why is visual processing higher in our society? Because we're a visual society. We're not an auditory society. So when I'm testing the children, I have a digit span book, and I never use numbers for auditory processing because the kids visualize them and they don't remember the sounds. When you're doing auditory sequential testing, you want them to remember the sounds and not picture it. All right? So when I'm doing the visual, I'll hold up a sequence of numbers for 3 seconds, take it away, and they'll tell me it said 2, 4. Okay? And I keep going up, hold it up for 3 seconds, and take it down, and they'll tell me what that said. And then I'll go to 4. All right. And I'll keep going up and find at what point the child falls off the wagon. So we can go up to pretty high numbers here. This is just my test book. When my son was doing it with different kids, they could get up to 18, 20 when they practiced them. So what is this is? You can take it into visual short-term memory and immediately put it out and read it back. Things that interfere with this. Things that interfere with this we can see on our developmental profile. Pupillary response to life is the lowest level. And when I'm testing a child, I'll shine a light right at the pupil and see how quickly they respond to light. If you have a slow pupillary response to light, there's usually something metabolic going on or some brain injury. All right. If you do this and the pupil doesn't contract, most often it's metabolic. In other words, some allergies or something going on. But sometimes with a brain injury, it can also be that. So the eyes should contract with pupillary response to light. That's why you need vitamin A in your diet too, cod liver oil. We don't get that in our diet. Unless you eat liver. Did y'all eat liver this week? Did y'all eat liver this year? Let me see, I hate liver face.
There's a really good recipe if you Google liver and onions with bacon fig compote. It's
Bacon
really good.
fig?
It's really good.
Actually, if you soak the liver in milk, it takes the bitter taste out, and it's very easy to cook it.
You should soak it in lemon juice.
Huh?
Lemon juice? I soak it
Well,
in
lemon juice too, but milk is good.
I haven't had it since I was 5.
Huh?
I haven't had it since I was 5, and I barfed it all over the kitchen,
And look how beautiful she is. She's gotten away with it. That's why I recommend cod liver oil, because we don't get retinol in our diet. We don't need organ meats like our grandmothers did. Unless you're an old-fashioned kind of gal. We have some of those here. So I look at the pupil response to light. With a newborn baby, they should be able to track horizontally. Well, actually about a month or 2. The baby, when they first start lifting their head, and they'll watch as you walk in front of they'll track horizontally at first. And then they'll learn to track vertically, lift their eyes this way, but also they start to see in detail at this level. This is the age at which a child starts to identify strangers. So they'll tell, I don't know your face, I'm going to cry if you look at me, all right? That's the level at which it comes here. And then they start to identify pictures and so forth. So, but also at this level, depth perception is the eyes need to be able to track from 18 inches slowly into 2.5 inches, and then back out to 18 inches, and then up and down, side to side smoothly. If you have a child that's visually distractible, if you have a child when you're coming in and eye goes out, then you need to get some eye exercises to help the brain learn to do that. And when the child is creeping on their hands and knees is when the child learns to start to use the eyes together. So they miss part of their that step. They will, and I see this quite often. If I'm coming in and the child and the eye goes out, or if the eyes go in, you don't need to snip and cut muscles. What you need to do is get the brain to learn to control the eyeballs. All right, snipping and cutting muscles, it's not the muscles, it's the brain-eye connection that needs to be.
What if it's just one?
Huh?
What if it's just one eye that goes out?
Well, you need to exercise it. You need the proper activities. And this is something I cannot give you general stuff to do because it takes me doing a specific evaluation and giving specific activities. If you do the wrong activities, you can actually make it worse. Look at this. He likes the books. Good. We have awesome mommies, don't we? Okay, so those type of things will interfere with it. Being hypersensitive to light or visually distractible. How many of you have children that do visual sensory play? Have you seen kids with autism stimming like this? That's because they're using their peripheral vision, they're not using their central detail vision. And we have ways to treat that. We actually have to interfere with the stemming while we work on those sensory pathways to do that. So anyway, that needs to be looked at too.
What about a sudden sensitivity to all light, sunlight, inside lights.
I would say it's some type of deficiency.
The doctors said, medical doctors said nothing's wrong. And I'm going, okay, she's wearing sunglasses in the house.
Take some cod liver oil and call me in the morning. Okay? No, vitamin A deficiency is real. Vitamin A deficiency, retinol deficiency is real. And it causes ear infections. It causes, which Adele Davis identified in the 1960s, chronic ear fluid or ear wax is a chronic ear infection. If you have too much wax in your ears, you have a vitamin A deficiency. It's a chronic low-grade infection because the mucous membranes are weak because of a vitamin A deficiency.
And wax buildup in the ears is also an indication of allergies.
Well, yeah, it's allergies. But, why do we have all those allergies? Why are we allergic to the world today? All right? We didn't used to be allergic to the world.
Deficiency and toxicity.
A few people had hay fever, but that was about it, Now everybody's allergic to everything, and they all have Lyme disease, right? So anyway. So how do we work on visual processing? Find the level of your child they're working at. And then we use very high-tech equipment. All right? I write the sequences, and I had a card file when my son was younger. We had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Charlotte Mason. So make a whole bunch of these. Hold it up at 30 seconds. Hold it up for 10 seconds, take it away, and have them say it back. All right? But you have to make a bunch of them because the kids memorize them. Creepy kids. Kid can't walk and chew gum and they'll memorize 30 cards. They will. So, but also you need to look at all the potential problems because almost all the kids I test are higher visual than auditory processing. So, and there's other things we can do, but we can, I've almost quit putting visual processing activities on programs these days because it's usually higher, and also just getting the kids reading with the programs that we do, because we do accelerated academics, to get them reading at a higher level as quickly as possible. I usually see the visual processing come in naturally that way. So working on that, there's some advantages to it. But visualization is a completely different thing. But we'll do math and reading next week, okay? So, any questions?
Oh, I have a question. Where does, watching, screen time fall as far as benefit versus negative effects?
Do you see the wheels of your car? That's where the screen goes. I hate screens.
Okay.
I have kids that I cannot get to do anything. Their behavior is tanked. They can't pay attention to anything else until I get them off screens. And all the therapists will want to put you on screens because apps are where it's at.
Yeah.
Do face-to-face. Do real world. I hate screens. Any questions? I'm not ambiguous about this. I hate screens for a kid. Define hate. With a perfect hatred, a purple passion. Yes. I'm not kidding. I have kids that are just raging maniacs until we get them off every single screen. And everybody slaps screens in front. They even have them in Johnny jump ups, and they have them on walkers. Huh?
They have them for this age.
I know.
Yeah.
No, they don't. Not for you.
No, for
Because you're the industrial strength mommy. Yeah. The only time I've seen it beneficial were our visually impaired kids, and we use it sometimes to help with tracking when they can't see almost anything at all.
What about for communication?
Huh?
For communication?
No.
Like for him, he's non-speaking at this point. So his therapist want to use an iPad to give him things that he can touch at to communicate.
He can use a PEX board. He doesn't need an iPad.
Yeah. Hey.
He can use it. He can use real pictures and real things to do that.
Okay.
He does not need an iPad. Yeah.
You hear that? No screen time.
Besides, we're gonna
That's what mommy said.
we're gonna start working with him sometime soon, right? Hey, hey. Oh, is he eating by mouth at all? That's what you need to work on. You can't talk if you can't eat. My kids that never eat by mouth don't talk.
Yeah. Well, we just kind of got over the severe oral aversion. So now
We work on that. Are you working with a good oral motor therapist?
Yeah. So he
Because I trained in oral motor therapy also.
So he went through the SOS program and doesn't have the oral aversion anymore, but he still has a fear response because he doesn't have a safe swallow. So that's part of what we're doing with the
Well, you are there. The suck, breathe, swallow reflex needs to be worked on.
His swallow is backwards. So that's part of his MNRI program.
Yeah. But a good oral motor therapist should work on that too. Do you have somebody that's trained with, what's her name? Sarah Rosenfeld Johnson. She's the best oral motor therapist in the world. She's retired, but I trained with her back in 2003, 2005, one of those decades. What decade is this? So they do feeding therapy and all that. Get in touch with me because one of my moms had a really good therapist that she was working with. Question?